Hi, welcome this afternoon to Supporting Your College Students' Mental Health, a helpful guidance for parents and caregivers. My name is Michelle Watson, and I work at NAMI New Hampshire as the Volunteer Engagement Program Manager. So for today's agenda, I'll get started with a brief introduction about NAMI New Hampshire, and then we're going to spend most of our time with our four panelists. Will share their experiences with all of you today. And then we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. So NAMI New Hampshire is a grassroots organization here in New Hampshire working to improve the quality of life for all by providing support, education, and advocacy for people affected by mental illness and suicide. We are comprised of a network of chapters and support groups, staff and volunteers, that provide information, education, and support to all families and communities. We have about 50 some staff members right now, as well as over 200 volunteers that provide this work out in the community. Our education programs are delivered by volunteers who are trained by other volunteers, and those programs are delivered free to families here in New Hampshire. We also have support groups. We'll talk a little bit more about the support groups towards the end, and those are also free to Granite Staters. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Our chat has been turned off because I find it particularly distracting. But if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we will get to them, as many of them as we can, towards the end of this webinar. The link to the recording will be mailed out within about a week, but you will also be able to find the recording on our NAMI New Hampshire YouTube channel. I have the link there, and maybe Deb can also put that into the chat as we go forward. We have lots of recordings there that you will find particularly helpful, from past conferences to other webinars that we've had on guardianship and many other topics. So I'm going to stop sharing right now, and I'm going to introduce our first panelist, who is, oh, we've got people all in here. Why are we not set up as a webinar? Okay, well, it's nice to see faces as well.
It could be me.
That's okay. So our first panelist is Alec Lenzen. She's a licensed psychologist and the associate director of the Dartmouth Counseling Center. She has worked in college mental health for over a decade and is passionate about supporting young adults' holistic well-being as they pursue their academic goals. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. And I am going to share my screen. I have a little PowerPoint to help me present the information I'll share today. So if you just bear with me for 1 second. Okay. All right. Can you all see this, or anyone give me a
yep.
early yes? All right. Awesome. Thanks so much. So as Michelle said, I'm the associate director at Dartmouth Counseling Center, and through my work here and as well as at previous universities, I'm hoping to share some of my experience and tips from sort of this side of the lens when students are transitioning to college. And I'm going to try to talk to you about some things to consider when your student is applying to and selecting schools, how to prepare once the school is selected, and then for students with emerging concerns or new mental health concerns, how you can support them through that concern and some action steps to take or to consider when there are emerging concerns. So starting by thinking about preparing to go to college, and this is particularly when you know already that there are mental health concerns present. And it starts as soon as the school search begins, because I think where they choose to attend is going to have an impact on how they will find holistic success. So the first place to start is asking, what are the most effective supports that are in place right now, and how can those be accessed or not at each school that your child is considering. So that might be treatment like individual therapy, group therapy, medication management. It also might be other resources like recovery resources, accommodations, whether that is a living arrangement or academic accommodations, as well as distance from home. What is working for them right now, and how do we harness those strengths to select a school where they are going to have those supports, as many supports as possible, available? And then on the other end, what are some risk factors for worsening mental health symptoms or for relapse for your loved one? And how can supports be put in place so those can be avoided? A really common risk factor is lacking social support, especially in this transitional period. It takes some time to connect with social supports, and what can you do in advance to help foster that? So that might be connecting with other students in advance through social media groups or through connections access that are facilitated by the school. There might be student groups on campus that they can identify in advance and either get connected with early or identify so that they can connect with as soon as they arrive on campus. There might be spiritual or religious spaces that can support your student if that's something that is important to them. Looking into what social supports exist and how to get connected with those as early as possible can really be game changing. For some students with certain mental health concerns, the presence of others using drugs and alcohol can be a risk factor for their own relapse or worsening mental health concerns. So thinking about, are there sober living communities on that campus? Are there local or on-campus recovery groups can be important to consider. And then thinking about also, and this kind of connects with that first question, right? But what are their most effective coping strategies, and if they don't have access to those, how might that set them up for increased risk? So this could be exercise, and having access to a free gym at a school is going to be something that's really important. Or some schools allow cars on campus and others don't. Is it important for them to be able to get off campus, whether that's to access treatment or to have some space from that environment? Can their class schedule accommodate their treatment plans or accommodate their self-care routines that are important for them to maintain? Considering all of these things as you're helping to search for schools will be important when that selection time comes. Then once a school is identified and you are preparing to move your student or your loved one to school, thinking as far in advance about connecting with treatment providers. So in some cases, your child will already have established treatment providers that they can continue with. Maybe they're staying local or even in state, and many times providers could continue with teletherapy or other telehealth services. Which providers can continue, which can't. Talk with each current provider. You'll also want to consider if they're technically, by the laws and regulations of their license, allowed to do teletherapy or other telehealth. Is that appropriate for what your student needs? Do they benefit most from in-person care? And even though you'll kind of have to weigh that, right? Like, is that continued connection with a specific provider more important, or is getting connected with in-person support going to be more impactful? You'll also want to think about the frequency of visits and the times of appointments. With changing class schedules, sometimes there'll need to be increased flexibility. Can their current providers accommodate that? And then I'll talk a little bit about this. I'll talk a little more about this in a minute, but updating those crisis support plans and making sure that you incorporate their treatment providers in updating those plans. If you cannot continue with the current treatment providers, searching for providers as early as possible is also really important. So a great first step is asking current providers for referrals. They will often have, especially if they've got a good relationship with your loved one, that can be a really great first step to help sort of have a warm handoff and facilitate the transfer of care. You can also contact a school's counseling center to learn about what resources they have available, as well as the resources that are available off campus, but locally. They're going to be well-versed in those resources, especially if it's a big geographical move for you. They're going to likely have a lot more knowledge of the local resources and who's expert in which areas, so they can be a useful resource. Many college campuses don't provide long-term therapy services. Their short-term therapy is the norm. So if you think that your loved one just needs therapy for the transitional period as they enter school, that might be appropriate. If you are looking for something that is more ongoing, it's likely that you're going to look into those local off-campus resources. That can be a little bit different with medication management. If the campus has psychiatrists or primary care providers that can manage psychiatric meds, usually they're more able to do that in a longer term basis, but each school is going to be different. So those are important questions to ask in advance. And I also would recommend always asking if there's any financial support available from the school that can help offset treatment costs. That's not going to be the case at every school, but there are many funds available if costs are a barrier for your family, that there might be financial support that can help support mental health treatment. And once you do have new providers identified, having releases of information signed with current providers so that information can be shared is super helpful, so that treatment can kind of continue on the path that it's been on and can be the most successful. You can also do your own searches. I included a couple sites here. Psychology Today is one that you likely have heard of if you've done any searching yourself. It's a very popular national search site. Thriving Campus is more focused on college-age populations, and so can be useful for this population specifically. Or Open Path Collective is focused on affordable mental health treatment options, so that can be useful for those with financial barriers specifically. In addition to thinking about the providers and transferring care in that way, you'll also want to think about transferring prescriptions. So identifying a pharmacy that your loved one can easily access. Sometimes that will be on campus. Many times it will be local, and you'll want to ensure that they have access, like physical access, so that they can either walk or drive to a nearby pharmacy. If that's not possible, depending on the location, you can look into receiving prescriptions by mail. There are some limitations around that, mostly for controlled substances such as stimulants or benzodiazepine, sleep meds. But that's something that you can ask the pharmacy or your student's prescriber. And thinking about proper storage of the medication. Does the medication need to be refrigerated, for example? Where do they have a mini fridge in their room, or is there another place that they can access that? Is it a hot ticket item? On college campuses, stimulants are often hot ticket items. Is it likely to be stolen if it's not secured? Does your student have trouble remembering when to take their medications, and having a medication dispenser that is on a timer, would that be helpful to them? Looking into some of those options to just make sure that they can stay on top of any of the resources that are most helpful to them, including medications. And then I alluded to this earlier, but updating a crisis plan. So often a crisis plan is going to include some emergency or crisis numbers. I included 988 on here as the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, but there will often be local crisis lines that are included on those plans, making sure to update those so that the location is updated with their school location, and adding to it, maybe there are additional crisis resources available through the school or locally that you can add to that crisis plan. You'll also want to revisit some of the skills or people or other strategies that they've accessed at home, and ensure that either those are still accessible while they're at school, or update those skills and strategies and people so that they will be accessible. There are new skills and strategies that are accessible while they're on campus. And of course, there are physical crisis plans that are effective. There are also apps. I included a link to one here, the Suicide Safety Plan, that most students are on their phones often, And so it can be useful to have something accessible in an app so that they don't lose it or misplace it. And then I won't go through each of these, but I will just mention that colleges often have a plethora of campus resources. And connecting back to that first question I asked about what supports are going to enable their success and what risk factors do we want to build support around, thinking about all of the campus resources as forms of potential support. So that could be a disability resource office around accommodations, a wellness office, an identity or interest specific resource, peer support programs. Many schools have a NAMI chapter or Active Minds chapter, but thinking about what other resources on campus that might not even be labeled as like a mental health resource, but will support your loved one's overall well-being. What resources are available and how can they have that information early so that it's not a barrier to accessing it later. And now shifting gears a little bit, because sometimes we know about the mental health concerns somebody's experiencing as they're preparing to go to college. Other times new concerns come up as they transition or after they transition to college. And so what I'd always recommend starting with is if you're concerned about your student, your loved one, to be honest about what you're observing and sharing those concerns. Having open communication that way, I think, is a good starting point. And it that sort of authentic sharing also allows you to then be curious about what they feel like they need for support. And you can offer, it's so hard being far away. It's so hard. And if you're far away, but offering to support them in navigating next steps, how you can from a distance or probably a greater distance than prior to school. So that might be they need advice around navigating social situations, or it might be they need to know what resources exist and how to access them, or learning more about a new diagnosis or new symptoms that they're experiencing. Those can all be ways that you can offer support. And then importantly, respecting their boundaries and their decisions. And the vast majority of time, I would recommend taking their lead, even if their decisions don't seem like the right ones and what you would always want them to do, because their investment in their well-being is really key in how successful any sort of treatment or support's going to be. There are limits to that, of course, when safety is involved or in certain urgent situations, but as much as possible, respecting their boundaries and their decisions and letting them lead that their plans is going to be the most successful in their overall and long-term treatment goals. And because that can be so hard, I highly recommend getting your own support. It is so easy when you are a parent who cares so deeply about your child or a caregiver who cares so deeply about your loved one to neglect your own needs and prioritize their needs above everything else. And you deserve to be supported in this process too. First, because you are a person who deserves that holistic support as well. And also because it's going to enable you to provide more effective and sustainable support to your loved one. So that could be therapy, could be connecting with organizations like NAMI and support groups that they offer or support groups offered elsewhere, but making sure that you are getting your own support during this time. And there will be times where you may need to take action. So that if there's an urgent concern about safety, I would recommend utilizing an emergency resource. So that could be calling 911. There, you could also, and this would be something to look up in advance to see if there are local mobile crisis units. So that would not involve law enforcement, but would involve mental health professionals who can respond. Not every location is going to have one of those, but for example, in New Hampshire, there's the New Hampshire Rapid Response Access Point where there are mobile crisis units available. but otherwise either campus safety or police or local police can do welfare checks to at least ensure that immediate safety and see if there is a need to transport to, for example, a local hospital. And then when you have concerns, but they're not necessarily that urgent, not emergent concerns, I would encourage you to look up support resources that can help your student and think about what feels like the most accessible entry point for them. Oftentimes, college resources are pretty interconnected. And so once a student gets connected with one resource, that resource or that person can help connect them with other resources. But taking that first step, whatever that step can be, is really important. And so it might not be that maybe it's that they will reach out to somebody at the gym who's not a mental health professional, but is a staff member at the gym who they feel comfortable with because they have been working out there and they feel comfortable with that person. And that person is going to be more accessible to them. That's great. Have them reach out to that person first, because that person at the gym can connect them with the counseling center or with the wellness office or with the disability resource center. Just thinking about what's most accessible to them and where to start. And then you can also call the school's counseling center to share information or to get advice. So this is usually a change for parents where their minor children, they're used to being able to have access to a lot of information about them. And then they go to college and it coincides with them becoming adults, and they lose access to that information. So this can be really scary and frustrating. When you call that school's counseling center, they likely will not be able to share information with you unless there's already a release of information on file. But they will take information from you. So what we'll do with that is, if a parent calls me with information that they're concerned about with their child, if that student is already seeing a provider here, I will share that information with that provider so that they can incorporate that into their assessment and treatment. And if they're not seeing a provider here already, I'll still note those concerns in their electronic medical record. So if the student does present to care later, we can incorporate that information at that time. But I won't be able to share any of that with you because I am prevented from doing so by HIPAA. And sometimes that's really hard because I empathize with parents a lot in their care and they're just wanting to support their student. And that is one of the things that helps us feel like a safe place for students because of the ways that we protect privacy. So you can share information that we can use if the students access our services. And you can also talk through situations with us. So we are mental health professionals. You know your student best, and we offer some expertise. So we might be able to share our advice based on the things that you're sharing around your next steps, or what red flags to watch out for. Like maybe right now things aren't feeling urgent, but talking through some of the indicators that would lead me to escalate my level of concern. We want to support you as best we can, and we'll try to share our knowledge and expertise in that way to help equip you as best you can to support your student. You can also check in with your students on campus social network if that's something that you have established. So some parents and students will exchange numbers with roommates, for example, or other friends. If everyone's comfortable with that, like I would do that in a very transparent and collaborative way. But if you have those numbers, you can either let those other students know to contact you if they have concerns about your child, or to reach out to those friends to check in if you have concerns. Of course, this is all with the caveat that these are also young people navigating their own stressors and often not fully equipped to support someone who's undergoing a mental health crisis specifically, but you can use sources of information that way to at least get a little bit of information and know where to land with your level of concern. And then I guess we'll end with sharing that I encourage you to trust your gut. You likely know your loved one best. And if you are not getting answers or not getting the help that you need, I encourage you to keep pestering. You might feel annoying, but it is not annoying to us. Certainly, we understand that desire. It can feel hard again on our end not to be able to share back with you, but that that's the advocacy that probably many of you are really already familiar with. But if you think that something is wrong and you need more support in getting your child support, keep pushing and know that you probably have a little bit more leverage than campus resources do. So you can also decide to come to campus and show up and say, I'm not leaving until we get you help. Or if you have, you know, that sort of relational connection or maybe financial support that you provide for school, there are ways that you can leverage that to help make it certain that they access support in ways that the college resources can't do. So I would use that as a last resort, again, going back to wanting them to lead their decision making as much as possible. But when somebody's health and well-being is on the line, I think it is appropriate to sort of leverage the control that we do have and leverage the power that we do have to help support our students and our loved ones as best we can. So I'll stop there. I hope to have time to answer any questions that you all have later, but I will pass it off to my co-presenters now.
Great. Thank you, Alex, so much. That was super helpful. And I'm sure we could have you talk for about 3 hours on ways to help families in this situation. So just a little tidbit. So thanks so much for that. So our next panelist is Michelle Park. Michelle is relatively new to New Hampshire, and we're so excited that she's moved here. She's in the Seacoast area and moved here from Arizona. She's been involved with NAMI for 5 years, and initially as a participant in a support group and education program, and now she's a family support group facilitator. She has a passion for providing hope for other parents who have also traveled through this very difficult journey of raising a child with a mental health condition. And so Michelle's going to talk from her perspective of having her child starting off the college process. So here you go, Michelle. Lots of Michelles today.
Yes, a plethora of Michelles. Um, so my daughter is 21 and is a freshman in college. She just started this past August. She's had a number of mental health conditions throughout her life, starting probably around the age of 7. She was always super bright. And so growing up, she loved school, and my husband and I, we both have advanced degrees and just always assumed that she would graduate from high school and go to college. And that wasn't even really something we thought about. We just assumed that that's the path that she would take. Unfortunately, as she got older, her mental health conditions became more serious. And kind of derailed her progress and all of our plans for her. She had to repeat a year of high school for missing so much school from mental health treatment. And she was getting to the point where she didn't even really want to go to college. She didn't care whether she went to college or not. She did eventually apply to college and was getting outpatient treatment and seemed to get better. So she applied to college, got accepted, and planned to start college in Massachusetts. We weren't convinced she was as stable as she could be to start college. So but we still really wanted her to go because that was the plan all along, her whole life. So we just followed her to Massachusetts. We both work from home. She's an only child. It seemed like a no-brainer. And her primary diagnosis is borderline personality disorder, which comes with a lot of emotion dysregulation. So we thought that putting her in a 4-week partial hospital program for DBT therapy would be just what she needed to succeed for 4 years at a university. So that's what we did. And she spent 4 weeks at McLean doing their intensive DBT. by week 2, they told us that there was no way she could go to college. She was not stable enough at all. And we were pretty devastated at that time, all three of us really, because I think she was kind of planning to go to college, just because she didn't really know what else to do. But we still, I think we're in quite a bit of denial. And we just thought, oh, it's fine. She'll just do a little more treatment. And then the following fall, which would have been 2024, she'll start college and everything's going to be fine. So she withdrew from the University of Massachusetts. She entered residential treatment at McLean. She was there for a few months, and our dreams were shattered again when they told us she needed longer term treatment and was not going to be ready anytime soon. So in the fall of 2023, instead of taking her to college like we were supposed to, we took her to the middle of nowhere in Texas to a long-term residential treatment facility. And I that was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Just leaving her there, across the country in the middle of nowhere. Um, and at that point, my husband and I kind of started to think, college may not be in her future. We didn't know what else she would do. We didn't really have any thoughts of alternative plans, but at that point, we kind of put that on the back burner because we were more worried about her safety and quality of life. So we were able to kind of accept that she had to go to Texas for this long-term treatment and put the school stuff kind of on the back burner. So even though dropping her off at Texas was horrendous, it was the best thing we've ever done for her. It took a year, but she got so much better. She has now been self-harm and self-harm free and sober for over 2 years. And her last suicide attempt was almost 2 years ago. And it really, I believe this program saved her life. And as she got better, she realized that she did want to go to college. She had a lot of self-hatred and really didn't feel good about herself. And I think that was part of the obstacle to college for her, was I just think she didn't think she could do it. And as she improved, she realized she wanted to go to college. So while she was in treatment in Texas, she applied to college. This time she did it without any help from us whatsoever. Her priorities had shifted. She now only wanted to apply to schools that had sober living arrangements, because that was her most important priority, was to stay sober. So she eventually decided to go to the University of New Hampshire. We've since moved to Portsmouth, so we're not in Amherst anymore. And she decided to go to the University of New Hampshire. I think the sober dorm was part of it. I think living close to home, I think she realized she's maybe not quite ready to be that far away. And also she loves her care team right now, who couldn't see her if she was out of state. So those were her big factors in deciding on UNH. So she stayed with us for 10 months, and in August, this past August, we dropped her off at UNH. I will tell you that was a breeze compared to dropping her off in the middle of nowhere in Texas. I knew that she was doing something she really wanted to do. I was super happy for her. I thought she was going to have fun. So I wasn't one of the crying moms at college. But then I got home and realized maybe I wasn't quite ready to let go, because I started thinking when she was at Texas, far away, she was safe. She was in a controlled environment. There were people watching her. They were checking in on her all the time. She couldn't really get into trouble. And now here she is in this free-for-all college campus. Um, I had no idea how it was going to go. And I started to, kind of freak out a little bit. So I was obsessively checking her location on my phone, and I was texting her a million times a day and panicking if she wasn't returning my texts in what I consider a timely fashion. She and I have different ideas about what that means. And I kind of realized I was spiraling. So right at that time, I stumbled on a webinar that was offered by the B Center, which is in Massachusetts. It's like a parent coaching organization. And it was about fear in parenting, and the fear that you can have when you have a child like ours. And they offered some simple DBT based skills for managing the fear that we can have that can come with, a child with serious mental illness. And it helped me so much. And it also reminded me they had taken a class just like that a couple years before when I was, again, panicking, called Managing Suicidality and Trauma Recovery. And that class is offered by NEA BPD. And it's a similar kind of thing, DBT-based skills for parents to deal with the emotion regulation, deal with the fear, communicate with their children who may have emotion dysregulation. And it made me realize I do have these skills. They were a little rusty and I just needed to kind of dust them off. And, after living at home for 10 months, I wasn't worrying about her because she was around all the time. And so I needed to just kind of dust off my skills. And so I am proud to say I am free from checking her location for 1 month now. Um, and um, and I feel like I'm doing a lot better with that. We did have a little bump in the road. We lost our dog over the weekend, and that's kind of been triggering for me. So I've been checking on her a lot more frequently. I have resisted the urge to get in the car and drive to Durham and check on her in person. But all of these little skills are kind of working, and I think that everything fell into place when it was supposed to. And I think we're all doing great as a family now. And that's it.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. I'm sure we'll have some other questions later on, but we're going to go ahead and move to our next panelist, which is Michelle Lewis. Michelle's the Executive Director for the Parent Information Center. She's the parent of 2 young adult children, one who has OCD. She enjoys running, biking, hiking, reading, cooking, and of course, spending time with family. And so Michelle's going to talk about what it was like through the process as her daughter's coming out on the other side of college.
Thanks, Michelle. So my daughter, she's also 21, and she's actually in her graduate degree year. She's an overachiever. So she did her undergrad in 3 years and now is doing a 1-year master's program. So when she applied to college, she did have some related learning needs, so we didn't know about the OCD at that point. And she navigated accessibility services at the university where she's at. She was able to set up something that worked for her based on her evaluations, and we were really proud of the way she took charge. She'd ask me questions along the way, but it was not something we had to be involved in at all. So, looking back, I would say that we definitely noticed signs of OCD, but when when she moved in to the dorms, it kind of blew up in the sense of the OCD exploded. And for her, it's uh, basically using hand sanitizer continuously. But she also has the intrusive thoughts that come with that. And we didn't understand OCD at all. So I only think about it through the perspective of, comments that people make about OCD or, "Oh, I was really OCD about that," or those types of things, not really understanding. She had all of these rules. So if you can imagine, and the rules don't make sense. And when you try to make sense of them, you can't because they only make sense to the person, right? And so imagine that in like we're 4 hours away, and she's in a dorm with a roommate. And so she actually acknowledged, we went up for, I don't know, parents' weekend or something. And she said, "I think I need to go to counseling. Like, this is a problem." And so we were like, absolutely. So we found, like, I immediately used my resources, found a counselor. And we were really proud of, again, she kind of took charge of what she needed to do. She refused to acknowledge that she had anxiety, only that she had OCD. And that was hard for us because OCD is an anxiety has an anxiety base to it. But for her, there was a complete distinction until apparently she saw a TikTok. So this is where I always joke with people that in this case, TikTok was really helpful for my daughter. Um, and so she came back and told us, okay, I have anxiety. I'm going to talk to my counselor and I want to go on medication, all because of TikTok. Not because of us and all the support we were giving her. Just saying that kind of jokingly, but on the other hand, I'm like, really? It took TikTok? Okay. So anyway, the counselor connected her with a psychiatrist and she did start meds. And as Alex was talking about, for us, it was out of state. So she goes to school in New York. And we were trying to figure out because of course she's also playing with her meds. I don't say playing, but right, you're trying to figure out dosages and stuff. And so I'm actually having to pick up meds at the pharmacy and then ship it to New York. And turns out you can't ship meds through the post office. You have to use FedEx, like all these little things that no one tells you, right? No one tells you, at least no one told me. Maybe some people do get told. Um, so I think that we had some challenges with the psychiatry, which she navigated really well um, eh, with my support. And I guess the piece I want to talk a little bit about here is that I was really and still am the primary support person for my daughter. Um, and so navigating her treatment and her ups and downs, particularly that first year, was all consuming for me. And that was a problem because it was affecting all aspects of my life because she would call at any time and I'd be worried if she was having a panic attack or whatever was going on. And so I would take the call, but I am not a mental health professional and nor, all of those things. And so I did put myself into counseling. I have been in counseling before and I knew I needed to find a way to kind of take care of myself, but also manage kind of myself as a caretaker. Um, we have, and still, I was just with her this weekend as we were away with visiting my son in Colorado. But as a family, we've really navigated these ups and downs. We're really honest with her about what we're seeing. But it also has taken a toll on our family, and it's taken a toll on her relationships, and kind of her ability to make relationships. And that just really makes my heart hurt. And I think that my struggle right now is she's very driven, and excels academically and excels professionally, but she does not excel in her personal life. And it's actually a source for her of struggle. And she'll say, I really want to be in a relationship, but I'd have to let someone hold my hand. I'd have to let someone touch me. And I can't do anything to help that. I can't, navigate that for her. I'll also say she's had multiple different counselors at different times. She went through a specialty counselor on OCD that we got her in touch with, and exposure therapy is like the gold standard for OCD treatment. And so as a family, the therapist asked us to be a part of it with Isabella with her permission. And then they went through everything and Bella prepped us beforehand and she asked us to share the impact And it was the first time, this was last year, it was the first time we had ever shared as a family the impact it has had on us. It had always been about Bella, and it had always been about we kind of accommodate, well, we accommodated her. And so it was the first time we talked about what that experience was like for us. Um, and we're on our way to kind of really starting some things. And then she started the low level exposure, which turned out to be not so low level. It was touching a door handle and then not washing hands. Um, Turned into a full-blown panic attack. And she then made the decision that she could not continue with exposure therapy after we met with the counselor per her request. And while I understand that and I 100% support her, I wish it was different because I watch her now. She put herself into counseling again to just work on anxiety. She's like, I cannot do it. And I know that. But on the flip side, I also see how impacted she is. Um, as we're out and about in Colorado this past weekend, kind of how and you can see the panic on her face when we are certain places, and I want to take that all away, but it's her journey, not mine, in terms of kind of her, where she's at with it. So, um, yeah, so our journey is not over. She will be graduating with her master's um, in May, and she has great plans, and I know she'll achieve success. I just am, there's this unknown for me for her. So,
Thank you, Michelle. It's a lot, right? It's hard being a parent and having these challenges and having them not be at home. So thank you for sharing that. So our final panelist, but awesome panelist, not last but not least, right, is Lauren Ariano. Lauren's a recent UNH graduate and a NAMI New Hampshire volunteer. She started the UNH NAMI on campus back in 2020. She graduated from UNH last May with a BA in psychology and in Spanish. She works in HR for a nonprofit organization that supports individuals with developmental disabilities and acquired brain disorders. Lauren also volunteers with NAMI New Hampshire as an interim voice presenter where she shares her story, and she's a Connection peer support group facilitator. So Lauren, you share your experience with being in college, away from home with a mental health condition, and then the hope that you can provide to the rest of us.
Yeah, so I'm Lauren. I'm like a year and a half out of college, which is really weird to say, and I kind of hate it. I wish I was back, but time to move on. So yeah, so before I was in college, I was already had my diagnoses. So I had a 504 plan in high school, and I knew that I had to look for a college that had some support. Me particularly, I had, a good therapist set up and everything. So I didn't need, I knew when was going to go to a college, I didn't need too much support, but I needed something there. So I decided to go to the University of New Hampshire, which they do ironically have lots of supports, which I was really fortunate enough to go there. I immediately utilized their student accessibility services program, where they helped me get my extra time accommodations. They helped me get my alternative settings. They made it up to me to determine if I wanted to tell my professors or not. So, it was always hard in high school. All my teachers had to know, even my gym teacher, which I always, you think is odd. Like, oh, I don't need to take a test in gym, so why did they need to know about my anxiety? So it was really great that they gave me the control and the freedom for that. So when I started at UNH, I knew I was also 3.5 hours away from home. And my mom was also my biggest advocate. She like did everything for me. And if I had to stay home because I had a panic attack, she was the one who was like, I'll email your teacher, don't worry. But now that fell on me, and that was kind of nerve wracking because when you're in that position, you know, in high school, they tell you you have a 504. It is against the law for your teacher to deny you your accommodations. And then you get to college and you're like, okay, is it the same here? Are there different kinds of rules and regulations? Could they say no? And that's just that. So it definitely is nerve wracking at first, that first year talking to your professors and seeing how it's different in college. I remember when I was talking with the student accessibility services, I said, you know, sometimes in high school, I had unlimited days off because I would have a panic attack sometimes in the middle of the night and I would get terrible sleep and it just wouldn't be good for me to go to school. And I remember I talked to him about it and he said, you know, I understand why you had it, but it doesn't really work like that here in college. You only have classes 2 days a week or sometimes once a week. So, you know, if we can work to maybe get that, but if you do that, you're going to fall behind. So it was definitely tough at first navigating the balance and the differences between what high school was like and what college was going to be like. Um, Once all that kind of got set aside within, you know, my first semester, I understood the processes. All my professors had good responses to um, me saying, you know, I have accommodations. I had some professors who would say, I require you to come meet me in office hours so we can talk about how I can better help you. So that was really great. So yeah. And then, you know, on the other side of things, not academically, my support system is 3.5 hours away. I can call my mom whenever I want. I can call my sister, my dad, but you know, sometimes that doesn't fill the void that you're looking for. You know, I had a therapist, but she was telehealth, and I wasn't interested in finding one in New Hampshire. So it was really important for me to find people around me that understood what I was going through. You know, it first started with my roommate, my college roommate. She was the best. She was also a psychology student. And right out of the bat, I was very open with her. I said, I have OCD, I have anxiety, and I have depression. Sometimes when I have depression, I don't want to take my medication. Can you check in on me and make sure I take it? Sometimes I don't want to get out of bed. Can you make sure I get out of bed by this time? And when I would say make sure, you know, it's not forcing me, but sending a nice text my way so I know someone's keeping an eye on me. So, you know, that's really important to find. It doesn't have to be a bunch of people, but just her being that one person was enough. Just, you know, someone you knew you could go to if you were going into a panic. And then, you know, I tried to find people who were similar to me on campus. I remember when I searched up, you know, different clubs at UNH, I literally went in the search engine and I typed in mental illness because I wanted to find people who I could talk to it about and help advocate for others. So I found, you know, NAMI on campus kind of just got started, and I joined them. And I felt really connected with the folks that were in that club. And then I eventually, over the years, became president. And I tried to make it even more accessible to students and more get our voices out there. So a lot of our club meetings were just about talking about mental illness, talking about how it sucks, talking about the resources we have on campus, talking about how the world doesn't understand, and but doing a fun activity at the same time. So just giving folks a really good outlet for that. And also, you know, letting them know, just like with, you know, with your mental health, it's okay not to come every time. We get you have lives, we get that things are stressful. You have a mental illness. We don't expect you to be here every day. So, you know, that helped find a great support for me and helped give me a great purpose at UNH. I helped start a 5K to end the stigma. It was of a fellow classmate whose sister passed away from suicide, so we got that going. I helped. What else did I had a green ribbon campaign where we made cards and we handed them out around the university to students so that they would know more about the resources we had. I found a lot of the times that a lot of my friends were diagnosed in high school, late in high school or in college, and they didn't know where to start. I was lucky enough, it sounds ironic, but I was lucky enough to have it since I was 9. So my mom and my dad, set the baseline for me, so I would be prepared to figure it out. But a lot of my friends didn't. So I found that a lot of them didn't know about these resources they could have on campus and in the area of New Hampshire. So, we did that campaign, and I do think, it got to some people, and hopefully they went to the psych and counseling center for a crisis call or everything else. Trying to think, and now just thinking of it, one thing I do think that is good when you're looking at a college is, and students sometimes might not like this, but when your college has their own police department on campus, students don't like that because they're always there all the time. But a lot of the times they have training to help students. And yes, when you call, you have the mobile crisis team, but sometimes that campus police is going to be there to you in 60 seconds rather than the mobile crisis team taking 10 minutes. And that's who's going to get to you first. There's a officer that works with NAMI, and he's great. And he would talk a lot with our clubs about, the calls he would get with students and how he would help them and support them. So yeah, I feel like that kind of summarizes my time at UNH, what I did, how I kind of got through those struggles, with my medication management. We did have a pharmacy on campus, but I found it was easier to use a chain. So I use CVS because it's a lot of times easier to transfer from a Connecticut CVS to a New Hampshire CVS rather than 2 different pharmacies. At first, when I went, we would schedule out when I needed my medications, and my mom would drive them up. Also to see me, but also to bring my medications. So yeah, I found that was the most efficient way for us both. And also, she could call them to help me schedule these. With on-campus pharmacies, they're more kind of like how Alex was saying with the counseling services. They'd love to talk to you, but it's the student they're supposed to talk to. With these other pharmacies, it doesn't really seem, obviously I signed a slip, but it doesn't really seem to matter as much, which was very helpful for me when I was learning how to send in a medication for myself and pick it up and advocate for myself when they said, no, it's not ready. And she would say, you go right back in there and you tell them that it's ready and they need to give it to you. So yeah, so those are some things I faced in college, and NAMI really helped me have an outlet to express it and to help other students who were struggling with it. So yeah.
So thank you, Lauren. And actually, we're almost out of time, and so we won't have time for questions, but I do want to share a couple more slides before we end, because at NAMI New Hampshire, we're always want to make sure that we also provide some resources as well as talk about some of the issues. So up here on this slide, you'll see on the left-hand side is a flyer for our family support group that Michelle Park runs for us. And it's for parents and caregivers that have young adults that have a mental health struggle. And they meet in person in Portsmouth. And it was really cool is a lot of our volunteers put their own little spin on the support group. So after the support group meets, they have a free art session because they meet at the Seacoast Art Spot. So that's really awesome. And I'm going to ask Deb to put into the chat some downloadable flyers as well, if she can. The other thing on this slide is our information about our information and resources that line that we provide support to free of charge. And I encourage people, if you've got any questions for yourself, for your child that's away at college, for a neighbor, please reach out to our INR line either through the phone number or through an email. Just to let you know, though, if you do call, it automatically goes to a voicemail. And a lot of times our staff will do some research before calling you back. So those are some great resources to have. And then, since Lauren also helps facilitate one of our peer support groups, I figured I should share that flyer. And this is, she's been trained by trained volunteers and certified to help lead a support group. And they meet twice a month on Thursday evening. And this group once a month also has American Sign Language interpreters in that group, which is really pretty exciting. But since you're here to listen about your college students, and since Lauren is a recent grad, maybe your child would be interested in joining her group. They do a really, really good job. So I want to thank all of our panelists today. It was really important information. I wish I had had that when my 3 kids went off to college. I think it's great to be prepared. So again, thank you all and have a great night.